Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a medieval Icelandic fishing village where the wind howls like a grumpy ancestor and the sea smells like salt and secrets. Picture yourself standing on a rocky shore, your boots sinking into damp pebbles as seagulls screech overhead. The year's roughly 1200, and this village, let's call it Hvitfiska, clings to a fjord's edge, its turf houses puffing smoke like sleepy dragons. Life here is tough. One bad fishing day, and you're eating boiled seaweed for a month. Honestly, you probably won't survive this place's bizarre laws, like the one demanding you whisper to your boat before sailing. Weird, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake in Hvitfiska at dawn, your breath fogging in the chilly air. Your bed is a wooden bench padded with sheepskins, and the walls, thick sod and grass, drip with dew. The village is already stirring. Fishermen trudge toward the docks, their wool cloaks flapping, while women stoke fires that fill the air with smoky peat. This place runs on fish, cod mostly, dried into planks called stockfish that feed half of Europe. Historians note Iceland's economy leaned hard on this trade by the 13th century, linking tiny villages like this to distant ports. But here's the quirky bit. Every house has a carved wooden fish hung over the door, supposedly to call cod to the nets. Nobody knows if it worked, but good luck arguing with tradition. The laws here are what make Hvitfiska truly odd. They're not written down, papers rarer than a sunny day, but pass through sharp-eyed elders who watch your every move. One rule hits you right away. You can't yawn in public. Seriously. Yawning's seen as laziness, and laziness means fewer fish, so you'd get a fine, usually a basket of cod or a week of hauling nets. Historians still argue whether this was about morale or just superstitious nonsense, but try stifling a yawn while lugging a water bucket. It's torture. You shuffle outside, your boots crunching frost, and notice the village's layout. Houses cluster like gossiping neighbours, all facing the sea. The air's thick with fishy tang, and you're already wondering how anyone sleeps through the gull's racket. Your first task is fetching water from a stream up the hill. Easy, right? Nope. Another law says you can't carry water before sunrise, because darkness taints the flow. You're not sure if it's about spirits or just making life harder, but the rule's enforced by a guy named Einar, who's got a beard like a bramble patch and a stare that could freeze lava. You grab a wooden pail, its handle worn smooth, and trudge uphill as the sky pinks up. A kid nearby trips, spills his water, and gets a tongue lashing from Einar. You stifle a chuckle. Bad move. Laughter's fine, but mocking someone's clumsiness could cost you a fish or two. This place is a minefield. By the time you're back, your arms ache and the village is buzzing. You spot a woman braiding her daughter's hair, both humming a tune that sounds like a lullaby had a baby with a sea shanty. It's oddly soothing, like this whole crazy place. You're starting to get why people cling to these rules, weird as they are. They're the glue holding Hvitfiska together. But as you set down your pail, Einar's eyeing you. Did you walk too slowly? Yawn without noticing? Welcome to medieval Iceland, where even dawn comes with a rulebook. You're still catching your breath from hauling water, the cold air nipping at your knuckles, when you step inside your turf house in Hvitfiska. The low doorway forces you to duck, and the smell hits you. Smoky peat, damp wool, and a faint whiff of yesterday's fish stew. It's dim inside, the only light trickling through a small smoke hole in the grass roof. You're here to tackle daily chores, But in this medieval Icelandic fishing village, every task comes with a side of bizarre laws that make you question your life choices. The walls, layered with sod, seem to hum with the village's pulse. Everyone's working, gossiping, or dodging fines for breaking rules nobody fully explains. This house is your world now, a cramped rectangle shared by a family of 6, plus a couple of sheep who wandered in for warmth. Historians know these turf houses were standard in Iceland by the 13th century, built to withstand howling winds and scarce timber. They're cozy, but damp, and you're already sneezing from the mold. Your first chore is sweeping the dirt floor, which sounds simple until you learn the quirky law. You can't sweep dust toward the door. It's bad luck, supposedly chasing away fish spirits. Instead, you push it to a corner, where it's scooped into a sack for some mystical purpose nobody clarifies. You fumble with the broom, a bundle of twigs tied to a stick, and nearly knock over a clay pot. Oops, breaking anything means a fine, maybe a day's catch, so you're sweating despite the chill. Next, you're on fire duty. The hearth, a stone pit in the room's centre, is the house's heart, and keeping it lit is your job. But here's the weird rule. You can't add fuel until you've whispered a 3-word charm to the flames. It's something about honouring the sea, but you mumble it, hoping nobody notices your terrible accent. The wood's scarce, mostly driftwood or dried dung, and the smoke stings your eyes. You're coughing, but you stifle it. Coughing too loudly could be seen as disturbing the peace, another finable offence. Historians still argue whether these household laws were about superstition or just controlling scarce resources. But either way, you're tiptoeing around like a guest at a grumpy aunt's house. You move to knead bread, a dense rye loaf baked in the hearth's ashes. The dough's sticky and your hands are a mess, but you're distracted by a neighbour's voice outside, haggling over a broken net. There's a law about that too. Nets must be repaired before noon, or you're banned from fishing for a day. It's a big deal. Fish are Hvitfiskar's currency, and missing a haul could starve your family. You smirk, imagining modern you trying to fix a net with duct tape. Bad idea. Smirking's fine, but laughing at someone's bad luck? That's a fine, maybe 2 cod. You focus on the bread, shaping it into a flat disc, and slide it into the ashes. The smell's oddly comforting, like a hug from a smoky bear. As you work, the house buzzes with life. A kid's carving a wooden spoon, humming that sea shanty lullaby you heard at dawn. His mother, weaving wool nearby, shoots you a look. Did you knead the dough wrong? You're paranoid now, second-guessing every move. The law says bread must be shared with anyone who enters before it's baked. So when a neighbour pops in, you break off a doughy chunk. She nods, but you're pretty sure she's judging your kneading skills. You're exhausted, and it's barely mid-morning. This house, with its smoky air and endless rules, feels like a puzzle you'll never solve. But there's something soothing about the rhythm. Sweep, knead, whisper to the fire. You're sinking into Hvitfiskar's strange groove, even if you're one wrong move from a fine. You step out of the smoky turf house, the sea air hitting your face like a cold slap, and head toward Hvitfiskar's docks, where the fishing boats bob like restless horses. Your boots crunch on gravel, and the gulls are screaming as if they've got a personal grudge. It's time to learn the bizarre boat-naming laws that keep this medieval Icelandic fishing village humming, or at least keep its elders busy fining people. The docks are alive with fishermen hauling nets, their hands red from the cold. And you're here to join them, though you're already wondering how you'll survive the rulebook that comes with every oarstroke. These boats are the village's lifeline. By the 13th century, Iceland's fishing industry was a powerhouse, with cod fueling trade as far as Norway and England. Your boat, a 6-oared wooden skiff, is sturdy but low in the water, built for chasing fish in choppy fjords. But before you can even touch an oar, you're hit with the quirky law. Every boat must have a name, and it has to be blessed by an elder chanting a poem about the sea. Your boat's called Seblik, Sea Sparkle, which sounds cute until you realize mispronouncing it during the blessing could cost you a day's catch. You practice saying it under your breath, feeling like a kid prepping for a spelling bee. The elder, a wiry guy named Thor, begrudgingly named Thorgrim, glares at you like you've insulted his ancestors. Historians still argue whether these naming rituals were about superstition or just a way to track boats. But one thing's clear: mess this up, and you're rowing in bad luck. You climb aboard Seblik, the wood slick with spray, and notice another rule carved into the hull. No swearing at the boat. Apparently, cursing Seblik offends its spirit, and you'll owe the elders a fish for every foul word. You bite your lip, already regretting that time you called your car a rust bucket. The crew, 4 grizzled fishermen, eye you warily. One mutters about a guy who named his boat Lazy Gull and sank within a week. You nod, trying not to laugh, because laughing at a boat's name? Yep, that's a fine. Probably 3 cod. You're starting to think Hvitfisker's economy runs on fines as much as fish. Your job is simple: row and haul nets. But there's a law about rowing too. You can't switch sides mid-trip, or you'll confuse the waves. It's nonsense, but you stick to starboard, your arms burning as you pull. The fjord's a grey mirror, reflecting clouds that look like grumpy sheep. A seal pops up, staring like it knows you're new, and you almost wave, then stop. Waving at seals is banned. It's seen as mocking the sea gods. You're not sure if you believe in sea gods, but you're not risking a fine. The net comes up heavy with cod, their silver bodies flopping, and you feel a weird pride. Then Thorgrim barks. Check the knots. Another law. Nets must have exactly 12 knots per row. No more, no less, for balance. You count, fingers numb, and pray you didn't miscount. As you row back, the sun peeks through, turning the fjord to molten glass. You're tempted to whistle, but surprise, there's a law against whistling on boats. It scares the fish. You roll your eyes, which is probably also a finable offence. The dock's in sight, and you're dreaming of dry clothes and that rye bread you needed earlier. But Thorgrim's watching, ready to pounce if you misstep. You whisper Seblik's name one last time, just in case, and step ashore, legs wobbly. The boats creak behind you, each with its own fussy name. Wavetooth, Frostfin, and you can't help but smirk. This village is absurd, but there's a rhythm to it, like the lap of waves, pulling you deeper into its strange, sleepy world. You're trudging along Hvitfisker's rocky shore, the sea growling to your left as you head to the village's makeshift market, a cluster of stalls where fish, wool and gossip change hands. The air's thick with salt and the sharp tang of drying cod, stacked like shingles on wooden racks. Your boots slip on seaweed, and you're clutching a basket of fish you helped haul from Seblik, ready to barter under the quirky trade restrictions that make this medieval Icelandic fishing village feel like a board game with missing rules. The market's buzzing. Women haggle over skeins of wool. Kids dart between stalls. And a stray sheep bleats like it's demanding a better deal. This market is Hvitfisker's economic pulse. By the 1200s, Iceland's fish trade was booming, with dried cod, stockfish, shipped to Europe's hungry ports, as historians confirm. But here, bartering's the game, and every trade comes with bizarre laws. The first one hits you hard. You can't trade fish unless you've presented them to the sea. This means holding each cod up, facing the waves, and muttering a quick thanks. You feel ridiculous, hoisting a slippery fish while a trader named Gudrun watches, her braid swinging like a metronome. Skip this step, and you're fined. 2 fish or a day cleaning nets. You mumble your thanks, hoping the sea's in a good mood, and notice a kid nearby giggling. Laughing at the ritual? That's a fine, maybe 1 cod. You're learning fast. Hvitfisker's rules are a tax on being human. You approach Gudrun's stall, where she's offering wool and bone needles. You want a needle to fix your cloak, torn during that rowing fiasco on Seblik. But another law kicks in. You can't trade more than 3 fish at once, because greed angers the tides. You pick 3 cod, their eyes glinting like moody marbles, and lay them out. Gudrun squints, then points out another rule. Fish must be stacked head to tail, not side by side, for harmony. You rearrange them, stifling a sigh. Sighing's probably a fine too. Historians still argue whether these trade laws were about fairness or just elder power trips, but either way, you're jumping through hoops like a trained seal, which, speaking of, you're not allowed to mention seals during trades. It's bad luck. You finally swap your fish for a needle, but Gudrun tosses in a curveball. You have to seal the deal by tapping the stall's wooden post 3 times. You tap, feeling like you're in a secret club, and she hands over the needle, carved from sheep bone. It's smooth, almost pretty, and you're oddly proud of your bartering skills. Nearby, a man's arguing over a bad trade. He offered 4 fish, breaking the 3 fish rule, and now he's stuck cleaning the elder's boat. You smirk, then catch yourself. Smirking's fine, but gloating. Yep, another fine. You weave through the stalls, dodging kids and a dog that's definitely breaking some law by existing. A woman's selling dyed wool, red, from madder root, and you're tempted, but your fish are gone, and bartering your boots feels like a bad idea. The market's chaos is weirdly soothing, like a lullaby sung by a drunk sailor. You spot Thorgrim, the elder from the docks, eyeing a stack of fish like a hawk. He's probably counting heads and tails, ready to fine someone for sloppy stacking. You slip away, clutching your needle, and head back toward the turf houses. The sea's still growling, and the wind's picking up, tugging at your cloak. You're starting to get Hvitfisker's rhythm. Trade, mutter, tap, repeat. It's exhausting, but there's a strange comfort in the rules, like they're holding this windy, fishy world together. You're not sure if you're a villager yet, but you're definitely not yawning. Einar's probably watching. You're weaving through Hvitfisker's narrow paths, the sea's salty breath on your neck as you head toward a neighbor's turf house where a feud's brewing. The village is quiet now, save for the distant clatter of drying fish racks. But tension hangs like fog. You've been roped into witnessing a dispute. Someone's cow trampled a garden, and in this medieval Icelandic fishing village, that's a big deal. The catch? Feuds here are governed by peculiar penalties, laws so odd they make bartering fish at the market feel like a breeze. You're clutching your bone needle from Gudrun's stall, half wishing you could sew this drama shut. Feuds were serious business in medieval Iceland. The Gragas, a collection of laws from the 13th century, shows how tightly villages like Hvitfisker regulated conflicts to avoid blood feuds that could tear communities apart. But Hvitfisker's got its own quirky twist. If you start a feud, like yelling at your neighbor over that cow, you have to pay a calm fine before sunset. This isn't gold or fish. It's a public apology delivered in front of the village, plus a gift of wool or bread. You arrive at the scene. 2 men, Olaf and Bjarni, red-faced and gesturing wildly. Olaf's cow ate Bjarni's turnips, and Bjarni's demanding justice. You're just here to watch, but the law says everyone nearby must stay silent, or risk a fine themselves. You zip your lips, though you're dying to whisper that Olaf's cow looks smug. The elder, Einar, strides up, his beard practically crackling with authority. He declares the penalty: Olaf must bake a rye loaf and say, "My cow's hooves regret their wander." You stifle a chuckle. Laughing during a feud hearing could cost you a day's fishing rights. Olaf grumbles but agrees, trudging off to knead dough. Here's the fringe tidbit. If he bakes the loaf wrong, say it's too flat, he'll owe an extra one, because sloppy bread insults the village. You're starting to think Hvitfisker's laws are less about justice and more about keeping everyone busy. Historians still argue whether these penalties were about community harmony or just elder power plays, but watching Olaf scowl, you're leaning toward the latter. You follow the crowd to the village centre, where Olaf's apology will happen. The air's chilly, and you pull your cloak tighter, the tear you need to mend with that needle nagging at you. The law says the apology must be loud enough for the sea to hear. Poetic, but annoying when the wind's howling. Bjarni stands with his arms crossed, turnip dirt still on his boots. A kid nearby whispers that last year, a feud over a stolen net ended with both guys weaving a blanket together as punishment. You bite your cheek to keep from grinning. This place is absurd, but there's a weird charm in how it turns fights into baking projects. Olaf returns, holding a lumpy loaf like it's a peace treaty. He shouts his apology, the words half swallowed by the wind, and hands the bread to Bjarni, who sniffs it suspiciously. Einar nods, satisfied, but adds another rule. Bjarni can't eat the loaf until tomorrow, to let the feud cool. You're tempted to roll your eyes, but Einar's watching, and eye-rolling might be a fine. Probably a fish or two. The crowd disperses, and you head back towards your turf house, the feud's resolution oddly soothing, like a story wrapping up. The sea's still muttering, and the gulls are back to their screaming. But Hvitfisker feels a little calmer. You're getting the hang of this. Dodge feuds, keep quiet, and maybe don't own a cow. As you walk, you wonder what other weird penalties this village has up its woolly sleeve. You're trudging back through Hvitfisker, the wind tugging at your cloak as you pass the turf houses, their grassy roofs blending into the hillside like sleeping giants. The feud over Olaf's cow is settled, but now you're roped into helping a group of women weaving wool in a cramped workshop, a low, smoky room buzzing with chatter and the clack of looms. In this medieval Icelandic fishing village, women's work is vital, but it's tangled in strange laws about wool quotas that make your head spin. You're still clutching that bone needle from the market, wondering if it'll come in handy or just get you in trouble. Wool was Iceland's other big export in the 13th century, alongside cod, with women spinning and weaving to clothe the village and trade abroad, as historical records like the Gragas confirm. But here's the quirky law. Every woman in Hvitfisker must weave at least 1 ell of cloth, about a metre per week, or face a fine of 2 fish. You're handed a spindle, a wooden stick with a whirl, and told to spin raw wool into thread. It's harder than it looks. The wool's greasy, and your thread keeps snapping. A woman named Sigrid, her fingers nimble as spiders, smirks at your clumsy efforts. Laughing at a bad spinner is fine, but mocking their wool? That's a fine, probably a skein of your own thread. You focus, trying not to curse the sheep this wool came from. The law gets weirder. You can't weave after sunset, because night threads tangle spirits. You glance at the smoke hole. The sky's still light, but dusk is creeping. Sigrid says last month, a woman wove past dark, and her cloth unravelled overnight. Cursed, they claimed. You're sceptical, but the room's humming with stories of wool spirits, and you're not risking a fine or a haunted loom. Historians still argue whether these quotas were about economic output or controlling women's labour, but as your arms ache from spinning, you're betting on control. The air's thick with lanolin's earthy scent, and you're sneezing again. Mould from the turf walls, probably. Sneezing's okay, But spitting? That's a fine, because it dishonors the wool. You swallow hard, keeping your germs to yourself. You finally produce a wobbly thread, and Sigrid shows you how to warp the loom, her hands dancing over the wooden frame. The law says looms must be blessed with a sea chant before use, like the boat-naming nonsense from Seblik. You mumble the chant, feeling like you're auditioning for a Viking musical. The other women hum that sea shanty lullaby you heard at dawn, and it's oddly calming, like a fan's hum back home. You're tempted to hum along, but, yep, another rule. Only married women can sing while weaving. You clamp your mouth shut, wondering if breathing too loudly is also a fine. As you weave, the cloth grows slowly, a rough grey strip that'll become someone's cloak. Sigrid checks your work, nodding grudgingly, but warns you about another law. If your cloth's uneven, you'll owe an extra L next week. You're exhausted, your fingers raw, and the idea of more weaving makes you want to hide in a fish barrel. But there's something soothing about the loom's rhythm. Clack, slide, clack, like Hvitfisker's heartbeat. You're starting to get why these women put up with the rules. The wool, the chants, the quotas tie them to this windy, fishy world. As you leave the workshop, the sky's turning purple, and you're praying you didn't weave past dusk. Sigrid's watching, and you're pretty sure she'd snitch to Einar. You're shuffling through Hvitfisker's chilly paths, the fjord glinting under a weak sun, as you head to the village's small wooden church, a boxy structure perched on a hill like a stubborn seagull. The weaving workshop's wool dust still clings to your cloak, but now you're roped into attending a sermon, where the rigid religious decrees of this medieval Icelandic fishing village make even the loom's rules seem relaxed. The air smells of damp wood and fish, and your bone needles tucked in your pocket, a reminder of the market's bartering chaos. You're already bracing for more bizarre laws to dodge. Church was central in medieval Iceland, with Christianity firmly rooted by the 1200s, shaping everything from marriage to morality, as the Gragas laws show. Hvitfisker's church is no cathedral, just a timber frame with a sod roof, its walls carved with crosses and fish motifs. Inside, it's packed, the air thick with peat smoke and unwashed wool. The priest, a gaunt man named Father Leaf, stands at a driftwood altar, his voice droning like a sleepy bee. But here's the quirky law. You can't sit until you've touched the altar's fish carving and whispered a prayer for cod. You fumble through it, your fingers brushing the smooth wood, and mutter something about fishy blessings. Skip this, and you're fined. A day's catch or a week of church chores. You slide onto a bench, hoping you didn't mumble too loudly. Exaggerated prayers are mockery. And, yep, that's a fine. The sermon's about humility, but the real lesson is the church's rule book. You can't yawn during the service. Remember that public yawning ban from dawn? Here, it's worse. A yawn could mean you're rejecting God's word, costing you 2 fish or a public apology. You pinch your thigh to stay awake, eyeing the congregation. A kid fidgets, and his mother hisses. Fidgeting's okay, but standing up mid-sermon, that's a fine, because it disrupts the spirit. Historians still argue whether these church laws were about devotion or social control. But as Father Leaf glares at a dozing fisherman, you're betting on control. You're tempted to smirk. Bad move. Smirking at the priest could be seen as disrespect, and you're not risking another fine after Olaf's cow feud. Then comes the quirky bit. Everyone must bring an offering, but it can't be fish. Fish are too common for God, so you've brought a lump of rye bread, like the one you kneaded in the turf house. You place it in a basket, noticing others' offerings. Wool, a carved spoon, even a sheep's horn. The law says offerings must be unique, so duplicate gifts mean both donors owe extra. You're glad you didn't bring wool after the weaving fiasco. Father Leaf blesses the basket, his voice rising, and you're lulled by the rhythm, like that sea shanty hum from the workshop. But you snap alert when he mentions another rule. No whispering during the sermon, because it steals God's attention. You clamp your mouth shut, wondering if thinking rebellious thoughts is also a fine. As the service ends, you file out. The fjords breeze a relief after the smoky church. Father Leaf's at the door, eyeing everyone like he's tallying fines. You nod politely, clutching your cloak, and head downhill. The church's rules: touch the fish, no yawning, unique offerings, feel like a test you barely passed. But there's a strange calm in the ritual, like the village's heartbeat pulsing through the pews. You're starting to get Hvitfisker's groove. Every step, from boats to looms to sermons, is bound by laws that are absurd yet oddly grounding. As you walk, the sea mutters, and you're praying you didn't accidentally yawn. Einar's probably lurking, ready to pounce. You're slipping through Hvitfisker's shadowy paths, the fjord a dark mirror under a sky prickling with stars. The church sermon's droning still echoes in your head, but now you're navigating the village after dark, where nighttime bands make this medieval Icelandic fishing village feel like a maze of invisible tripwires. The air's sharp with frost, and your cloak, still torn, despite that bone needle in your pocket, flaps like a tired flag. You're sneaking around, trying to visit a friend's turf house for a late-night chat, but the curfews banning idle talk after sundown have you on edge, ears pricked for Einar's heavy footsteps. Nighttime in medieval Iceland was tightly controlled, with laws like those in the Gragas, aiming to keep villages productive and orderly, especially in harsh winters. Hvitfisker's curfew is strict. No gatherings after the last light fades, because night talk stirs mischief. You're risking a fine, 3 fish or a day mending nets, just by being out here. The quirky law, though, is weirder. If you're caught, you have to sing a specific sea chant to appease the dark. You've heard it before, that shanty lullaby from the weaving workshop, but singing it solo under Einar's glare? No thanks. You crouch behind a fish rack, its cod silhouettes swaying like ghosts, and pray the gulls don't rat you out. Historians still argue whether these bans were about safety or just elders flexing control. But as you dodge a patrolling villager, you're voting for the latter. You're not alone in breaking curfew. A shadow moves nearby, your friend Ingvar whispering about a dice game in his turf house. Dice are fine, but games after dark, banned because they tempt fate. You're tempted to join, imagining the cozy glow of his hearth, but the law says nighttime visitors must bring a peace gift, bread or wool, to avoid a fine. You've got nothing but that needle, and bartering it now feels like betraying Gudrun's market hustle. You whisper to Ingvar to wait, your breath fogging, and creep toward his house. The village is eerily quiet, save for the sea's low growl and a sheep bleating like it's snitching. You smirk? Bad move. Smirking's okay, but laughing at night? That's a fine, probably 2 cod, for disturbing the peace. You reach Ingvar's door, but another rule hits. You can't knock after dark. You have to tap the frame 3 times and hum. You do it, feeling like a spy in a bad Viking movie, and Ingvar lets you in. The turf house is warm, the peat fire crackling, but you're paranoid. Einar or Thorgrim could barge in, demanding that sea chant. Ingvar offers you ale, brewed from barley and herbs. But even that's regulated. No drinking past midnight, or you'll owe a fish for clouding the dawn. You sip slowly, the ale's tang grounding you, and swap stories about Olaf's cow feud and the church's no-yawn rule. Ingvar says last week a guy got fined for whistling at night, same as the boat rule, because it scares the stars. You bite your cheek to keep from chuckling, remembering the market's head-to-tail fish stacks, As you leave, the stars are brighter, the fjord a black ribbon. You're dodging shadows, heart thumping, but there's a thrill in outsmarting the curfew. The village's laws, sing, hum, no dice, feel like a game you're barely winning. Yet there's a sleepy rhythm to it, like the sea's pulse, tying Hvitfiska's nights to its days. You slip back to your turf house, the frost crunching underfoot, and slide onto your sheepskin bed. You're safe, for now. But as you drift off, you're half expecting Einar to fine you for dreaming too loudly. You're up with the dawn in Hvitfiska, the fjord shimmering like spilled mercury, as you trudge toward the village's grazing fields, where shaggy sheep bleat like they're gossiping about last night's curfew dodge. The air's crisp, smelling of dew and fish racks, and your cloak's still flapping with that tear you haven't fixed with Gudrun's bone needle. Today, you're herding sheep, but in this medieval Icelandic fishing village, livestock comes with eccentric regulations that make rowing Seblik seem like a vacation. You're already squinting for Einar, wondering if he'll fine you for breathing too sheepishly. Sheep were Iceland's backbone in the 13th century, providing wool, milk and meat, with villages like Hvitfiska relying on them as much as cod, per historical records. Your job is simple: guide the flock to a hillside pasture. But here's the quirky law. Every sheep must be named, and you can't call two by the same name, or you'll owe a fish for confusing the herd. Your flock's got names like Snowtuft and Grumblehoof, and you're muttering them like a sleep-deprived poet, hoping you don't mix up Frost Ear with Wool Snout. A kid nearby, tasked with counting tails, says last year a herder got fined for calling 3 sheep Bjorn. You stifle a grin. Laughing at sheep names could cost you a day's milking rights. Historians still argue whether these naming laws were about ownership or just elder whims, but as you nudge Grumblehoof along, you're leaning toward whims. The path's muddy, and your boots suck at the ground like grumpy clams. Another rule hits. You can't herd after noon unless you've tied a blue thread to your staff, because midday sun tricks the flock. You've got a thread, knotted from Sigrid's weaving workshop, but tying it while Snowtuft tries to eat your cloak is a circus act. You're tempted to shoo her with a curse, but swearing at sheep. Yep, a fine. 2 fish because it sours the milk. You pat her instead, her wool greasy under your fingers, and she bleats like she's judging your herding skills. The pasture's a green slope dotted with rocks, and you guide the flock, staff in hand, feeling like a Viking shepherd with 0 chill. Then comes the weirdest rule. You must whistle a specific tune, different from the band boat whistling, to calm the grazing. You try, but your whistle's more wheeze, and Frost Ear glares like you've insulted her ancestors. A nearby herder, an old woman with a face like weathered driftwood, corrects your tune. She says her cousin skipped the whistle once, and half the flock wandered off, cursed supposedly. You're skeptical, but you keep whistling, the notes blending with the wind's hum. It's oddly soothing, like that sea shanty lullaby from the market, and you're sinking into Hvitfiska's rhythm again. But you're paranoid. Did you call Wool Snout by the wrong name? Einar's probably lurking behind a rock, tallying fines. By midday, the sheep are grazing, and you're tying that blue thread, fingers fumbling. The sun's high, warming your face, and the fjord sparkles below. You're tempted to sit, but another law says herders can't rest until the flock's settled, whatever that means. You keep moving, whistling, naming and praying you didn't break some unspoken sheep rule. The village's laws, names, threads, tunes, are a tangle, but they're weaving you into this windy, woolly world. As Grumblehoof munches grass, you wonder if she's plotting to get you fined. Probably. Hvitfiska's sheep are as sneaky as its elders. You're trudging back from the sheep pastures, the fjord's breeze tugging at your cloak, as Hvitfisker's village centre comes into view, where a feast is being set up under the watchful eyes of the elders. The air hums with the scent of roasting mutton and rye bread, and your stomach growls louder than the gulls circling overhead. You've still got that bone needle from the market, but it's useless now. You're here to join a banquet, where strict dining etiquette rules make this medieval Icelandic fishing village feel like a royal court with fishier steaks. The tables, rough-hewn wood, are laden with platters, and you're already eyeing the ale, wondering what bizarre law you'll trip over next. Feasts were big in medieval Iceland, strengthening community ties and showing off wealth, as the Gragas laws and sagas suggest. Hvitfisker's banquet is no royal bash, but it's a big deal, maybe celebrating a good cod haul. You're handed a wooden plate, but here's the quirky law. You can't eat until you've thanked the table by tapping your plate 3 times and saying, "For sea and soil." You tap, mumble, and hope you didn't sound sarcastic. Mispronouncing the phrase could cost you a fish or a seat at the kids' table. The elder Thorgrim's watching, his beard like a storm cloud, and you're pretty sure he'd fine you for blinking wrong. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about gratitude or just elder control. But as you dodge Thorgrim's glare, you're betting on control. You sit, squeezing between Sigrid from the weaving workshop and a fisherman who smells like Seblik's nets. The law says you must eat with your right hand only. Left hands are unlucky and could earn you a fine of 2 cod. You're right-handed, so it's fine, but you're paranoid about spilling. Spilling food? Yep, a fine, because it wastes the sea's gifts. You take a cautious bite of mutton, tender and smoky, and sip ale from a shared horn. Then comes the weirdest rule. You can't compliment the food. Praising the meal tempts jealousy, and last month a guy got fined for saying the bread was fluffy. You chew silently, though the rye loaf, like the one you needed, tastes like a warm hug. You're tempted to nod at Sigrid, but even that might be too close to praise. The banquet's lively, with kids sneaking bread and a woman humming that sea shanty lullaby, which, miraculously, isn't banned here. But another law kicks in. You can't leave the table until the eldest diner, a grandma named Astrid, finishes. She's chewing like she's savouring every molecule, and you're stuck, plate empty, while Thorgrim eyes you like you're planning a coup. You fidget, remembering the church's no fidget rule, and wonder if it applies here. Probably. You're tempted to whisper to Sigrid about Olaf's cow feud, but talking out of turn. That's a fine, maybe a day cleaning fish racks. You sit still, the ale's warmth spreading, and try to look like you're not plotting an escape. As Astrid finally pushes her plate away, the crowd stirs, and you're free, sort of. You slip outside, the fjord's cool air a relief after the smoky feast. The rules, tap right hand, no compliments, are absurd, but there's a rhythm to them, like the clack of Sigrid's loom or Grumblehoof's bleating. You're sinking deeper into Hvitfisker's world, where every bite comes with a law, and every law feels like a thread tying the village together. You pat your needle, wondering if you'll ever mend that cloak, and head toward your turf house. The stars are out, and you're praying you didn't break some unspoken feast rule. Thorgrim's probably counting your chews. You're weaving through Hvitfisker's muddy paths, the fjord's grey shimmer catching your eye, as the village hums with post-feast chatter. The mutton and ale from the banquet sit heavy in your stomach, but now you're headed to a neighbour's turf house, where a betrothal is being negotiated, tangled in the odd marriage laws that make this medieval Icelandic fishing village feel like a soap opera with woollier costumes. Your cloak's still torn, that bone needle from Gudrun's market useless in your pocket, and you're bracing for more rules that could trip you up faster than Grumblehoof bolting from the pasture. Marriage in medieval Iceland was a contract, often more about land and alliances than love. with the Gragas laws laying out strict terms for betrothals. In Hvitfisker, it's no different, but the quirky law here is wild. The groom-to-be must carve a wooden spoon for the bride's family and present it during the betrothal talks, without speaking. You're watching young Gunnar, a fisherman with hands like ham hocks, fumble with a half-carved spoon, his face red as he sits across from Astrid's daughter, Frida. If the spoon's flawed, say a rough handle, you'll find a fish, and the talks could stall. You're just a guest, but you're paranoid about breaking a rule, like laughing at Gunnar's carving skills. Chuckling during betrothals? Yep, a fine. Probably 2 cod for mocking love. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about craftsmanship or symbolic trust, but as Gunnar sweats, you're thinking it's just elder torture. You're crammed into the turf house, the air thick with peat smoke and tension. The law says guests must bring a union gift, a skein of wool or bread, and you've got a rye loaf chunk from the feast, which you hand over praying it's unique enough, like the church's offering rule. Another rule hits. No one can mention the sea during betrothal talks because it distracts from land-bound vows. You bite your tongue, remembering Seblik's naming drama, and focus on the scene. Frida's mother inspects the spoon, her eyes like Einar's when he's hunting yawns. Gunnar's silent, per the law, but his fidgeting screams nerves. You're tempted to whisper encouragement, but talking out of turn could cost you a day's fishing rights. You sit still, the sea shanty lullaby from the weaving workshop echoing in your head, soothing despite the stakes. Then comes the fringe bit. If the bride's family accepts the spoon, they must tie a red thread, dyed like the market's wool, around it to bind the promise. Frida's mother pulls out a thread, and you're relieved, but another law says the thread can't touch the floor, or the betrophal's cursed. She ties it carefully, and you're holding your breath, half expecting Snowtuft to barge in and ruin everything. The room's quiet, save for the fire's crackle, and you're sinking into Hvitfisker's rhythm again. Spoons, threads, silence, all part of its weird heartbeat. You're tempted to scratch your nose, but even that might break a rule. Probably. As the talks wrap, Gunnar's spoon is accepted, and Frida blushes, though you're not sure if it's love or just the smoky air. You slip outside, the fjord's breeze cooling your face. The marriage laws, no sea talk, silent carving, red threads, are as tangled as Sigrid's loom, but they're weaving this village together, one betrothal at a time. You pat your needle, wondering if you'll ever fix that cloak, and head back to your turf house. The stars wink above, and you're praying you didn't accidentally mention the sea. Thorgrim's probably lurking, ready to fine you for breathing too romantically. You're trudging through Hvitfisker's chilly paths, the fjord's dark shimmer reflecting a sky bruised with clouds, as you head to the village centre where a trial's unfolding. The betrophal's warm glow is behind you, but now you're caught up in the drama of a crime. Someone's broken a bizarre local statute, and in this medieval Icelandic fishing village, justice is as tangled as the marriage laws you just dodged. Your cloak's still flapping, that bone needle from the market a useless weight in your pocket, and you're bracing for more rules that could snag you like a net on Seblik's hull. Trials in medieval Iceland were public affairs, with the Gragas laws ensuring disputes were settled openly to keep peace, and Hvitfisker's no exception. Today's case, a fisherman named Leif, accused of cutting his neighbour's fishing line, a serious offence when cod is king. The quirky law he broke? Lines must be knotted with exactly 7 loops, blessed by a sea chant, and cutting one, blessed or not, means a fine of 5 fish, or a month cleaning boats. You're just a bystander, standing among villagers smelling of wool and ale, but you're paranoid about breaking a trial rule, like whispering during testimony. Muttering out of turn? Yep, a fine. 2 cod for disrupting justice. You clamp your mouth shut, remembering Gunnar's silent spoon-carving ordeal. Historians still argue whether these precise laws were about fairness or just elder micromanaging. But as Einar strides up, beard bristling, you're betting on the latter. The trial's held in a grassy clearing, with Leif facing his accuser, a wiry man named Ketil. Einar, acting as judge, demands Leif hold the cut line, a frayed hemp rope, while swearing he didn't do it. Here's the fringe bit. If Leif's hands shake while holding it, he's guilty, because the sea reveals unsteady hearts. Leif's hands wobble, and the crowd murmurs. You're tempted to roll your eyes. Shaking could just mean he's cold, but eye-rolling during a trial? That's a fine. Probably a fish. You focus on the rope. It's knots like the ones you counted on Seeblick's nets. Ketil claims Leif cut the line out of jealousy, and Leif snaps back, his voice sharp. Bad move. Raising your voice in a trial breaks another law, costing a day's fishing rights. Einar glares, and you're sinking into Hevitfiska's rhythm again, where every word's a potential trap. The law says accusers must offer a truth gift to prove sincerity. So Ketil presents a carved whalebone comb, its teeth worn smooth. You're reminded of the betrothal's red thread and the church's unique offerings. Hvitfiska loves its symbolic trinkets. Another rule, the crowd can't cheer or boo, or everyone nearby owes a fish for swaying the sea's judgment. You stand still, the wind tugging your cloak, and notice Sigrid nearby, her braid swaying like a pendulum. You're tempted to nod, but even that might be too loud in this tense air. Leif's fined, 5 fish, and ordered to weave a new line under Einar's watch. He storms off, muttering, and you're praying he doesn't curse the sea. That'd be another fine, like the no-swearing rule on Seeblick. As the crowd disperses, the fjord's waves lap like a sleepy pulse, and you head back toward your turf house. The trial's rules, 7 knots, steady hands, silent crowds, are as fussy as the banquet's no-compliment law, but they're weaving Hvitfiska's chaos into order. You pat your needle, wondering if you'll ever mend that cloak, and glance at the sky, half expecting Einar to fine you for loitering. The village's heartbeat, trials, feasts, sheep names, pulls you deeper, and you're almost okay with its absurdities. Almost. Just don't let Thorgrim catch you yawning. You're trudging along Hvitfiska's rocky shore, the fjord's icy breath nipping at your face as clouds pile up like grumpy sheep. The trial's drama, Leif's shaky hands and that cut fishing line, still lingers. But now you're back at the docks, where a brewing storm has everyone scrambling. In this medieval Icelandic fishing village, fishing bans tied to superstitious weather signs are as strict as the trial's knot rules, and you're caught in the chaos, clutching your torn cloak and that useless bone needle from Gudrun's market. The sea's churning, and you're praying you don't trip over another bizarre law. Weather shaped everything in 13th century Iceland, with fishing schedules dictated by wind and tide, as sagas and archaeological records show. Today, the elders have banned fishing because the clouds are too heavy, a sign the sea gods are grumpy. The quirky law here is wild. Before a storm, every fisherman must tie a pebble to their boat's bow to weigh down the waves. You're helping on Seeblick, fumbling with a smooth stone and hemp rope, while Thorgrim watches, his beard twitching like he's tallying fines. Skip the pebble, and you're docked 3 fish or a week hauling nets. You tie it, muttering Seeblick's name for luck, remembering the boat-naming chant from your first day. Laughing at the pebble rule. Yep, a fine. 2 cod for mocking the sea. You bite your cheek, recalling Leif's trial outburst. Historians still argue whether these weather bans were about safety or elder superstition, but as the wind howls, you're leaning toward safety. The dock's a mess, fishermen secure boats, nets flapping like trapped birds. Another law kicks in. You can't speak above a whisper near the water during a ban, because loud voices stir the storm. You hiss instructions to a kid tying down oars, your voice barely audible over the gulls screeching. The kid says last week, a guy shouted and got fined for a storm that sank a skiff. Cursed, they claimed. You're skeptical, but you whisper. The seas growl loud enough for both of you. The air's thick with salt and panic, and you're sneezing again. Mould from the turf houses, probably. Sneezing's fine, but spitting near the dock, that's a fine, because it insults the waves. You swallow hard, dodging another rule. Then comes the fringe bit. During a fishing ban, everyone must carve a fish shape into the dock's wood to call the cod back after the storm. You're handed a knife, its blade dull, and start scratching a wobbly fish next to Sablic's mooring. Your carving's awful, more blob than cod, but a bad fish could mean a fine or extra carving duty. You focus, the knife's scrape blending with the wind's hum, like that sea shanty lullaby from Sigrid's Loom. You're tempted to whistle it, but, surprise, whistling during a ban is forbidden, just like on boats, for scaring the fish. You're sinking into Hvítfisker's rhythm again, where every storm comes with a ritual. Thorgrim's eyeing your fish blob, and you're praying it passes muster. As the clouds darken, you finish. The dock now a gallery of carved fish, some actually decent. The village feels hushed. The sea's roar the only voice. The pebble, the whispers, the carvings. They're absurd, but they're grounding this windy chaos, like the trial's truth gift or the betrothal's red thread. You head back to your turf house, the storm's first rain stinging your face. Your cloak's tear flaps wildly, and you pat that needle, wondering if you'll ever sew it shut. The fjord's a churning beast, and you're half expecting Einar to fine you for walking too loudly. Hvítfisker's laws are a maze, but they're weaving you into its salty, stormy heart. You're huddled in a Hvítfisker turf house, the storm outside rattling the sod walls like an angry ancestor, while the fjord howls beyond the village. The fishing ban's got everyone grounded, so you're gathered around a peat fire, its smoky glow dancing on faces as an old storyteller spins sagas. But in this medieval Icelandic fishing village, even storytelling is bound by laws about accuracy that make carving fish blobs on Seblic's dock feel like a breeze. Your cloak still torn, that bone needle from Gudrun's market tucked away, and you're bracing for rules that could fine you faster than whispering during a storm. Storytelling was huge in the 13th century Iceland, with sagas preserving history and culture, often recited in winter as archaeological and textual evidence, like the Icelandic shows. Tonight, the storyteller, a wiry woman named Thora, is weaving a tale about a hero who outsmarted a troll. But here's the quirky law. Every saga must include a truth vow, a phrase swearing the tale's accuracy, or the teller owes 3 fish. Thora pauses, says, "By sea and stone this is true," and continues, her voice low and rhythmic. You're mesmerized, but you're paranoid about breaking a rule, like interrupting her flow. Clapping mid-story? Yep, a fine. 2 cod for breaking the saga's spell. You sit still, remembering Leif's trial and his shaky hands. Historians still argue whether these accuracy laws were about preserving history or elder ego, but as Thora glares at a fidgeting kid, you're betting on ego. The law gets weirder. Listeners must nod at specific moments, when the hero's named or a place mentioned, to honor the tale. You nod when Thora mentions Bjorn the Bold and Skull Fjord, feeling like you're in a choreographed dance. Miss a nod, and you're fined a fish or tasked with fetching Thora's water tomorrow. You're tempted to yawn. Bad move. Yawning during a saga is disrespect, costing a day's fishing rights, just like at church. The fire crackles, and the room's warm, smelling of wool and ale. But you're on edge, the storm's roar sneaking through the walls. Thora's tale spins on, and you're sinking into Hvitfiska's rhythm, that sea shanty lullaby from Sigrid's loom echoing in your head. Then comes the fringe bit. If someone doubts the saga's truth, they must challenge Thora by offering a story gift, a carved bone or bread, and retell it themselves. A kid tries, holding out a lumpy rye loaf, but his version's a mess, and Thora shuts him down. Challenging poorly? That's a fine, and he's now sweeping her floor for a week. You're tempted to smirk. His troll sounded more like grumble hoof, but smirking at a bad teller could be seen as mockery. You focus on the fire, its glow like the fjord's glint at dawn. Another rule, no leaving until Thora finishes, like waiting for Astrid at the feast. You're stuck, the storm raging, and Thora's voice weaves you deeper into Hvitfiska's world. Trolls, heroes, and fussy laws. As Thora wraps up, the crowd nods one last time, and you're free. The storm's still pounding, but the saga's left you oddly calm, like the pebble you tied to Seblik. These rules, vows, nods, gifts, are as tangled as the betrothal's red thread, but they're tying this village to its stories. You slip outside, the rain stinging, and head to your turf house. Your cloak's tear flaps, and you pat that needle, wondering if you'll ever mend it. The fjord's a dark roar, and you're half expecting Einar to fine you for listening too loudly. Hvitfiska's heartbeat, sagas, storms, sheep pulls you in, and you're almost at home in its absurdity. You're slipping through Hvitfiska's quiet paths, the storm's fury fading to a soft drizzle as the fjord gleams under a moon like a polished coin. The saga's tales of trolls and heroes still hum in your mind, but now you're wandering the village alone, reflecting on its strange laws under a starlit sky. In this medieval Icelandic fishing village, every step, from Seblik's pebble to Thora's truth vow, has been a dance of rules, and you're ready to let it all sink in. Your cloak's still torn, that bone needle from Gudrun's market a quiet weight, and you're breathing easier, the night's calm wrapping you like a sheepskin. Iceland's nights were for reflection, with the 13th century's long winters fostering introspection, as sagas and archaeological records suggest. You pause by the shore, the waves lapping like a sleepy heartbeat, and think about Hvitfiska's laws. There's no quirky rule tonight, just a final law. No standing still too long after dark, because idleness invites spirits. You shuffle forward, boots crunching on pebbles, and smile. Breaking that rule feels right. Historians still argue whether these laws were about survival or superstition, but you're starting to see them as Hvitfiska's pulse, tying boats, feasts and sagas into one windy fishy hole. You're tempted to hum that sea shanty lullaby from Sigrid's loom, but humming at night? Probably a fine, though Einar's not here to catch you. You pass the docks, where Seblik bobs, its pebbles still tied from the storm. The fish blobs you carved gleam faintly, and you remember the market's head-to-tail stacks, the betrothal's red thread, Leif's trial. Each rule was a thread in Hvitfiska's tapestry, absurd but grounding. Here's the fringe bit. Some say villagers whispered laws to the moon to seal their day, a habit unrecorded but whispered in sagas. You try it, murmuring about sheep names and no-yawn rules, your voice blending with the waves. It's silly, but it feels like closure, like tapping the feast table or nodding at Thora's saga. You're sinking into the village's rhythm one last time. The fjord's glow a mirror for your thoughts. You reach your turf house, the sod walls damp under starlight. The air's cool, smelling of salt and peat, and you're tempted to linger, but that idleness rule nags. You smirk. Smirking's fine, and no one's fining you now. Inside, Your sheepskin bed waits, and you imagine Grumble Hoof bleating approval. Hvitfisker's laws, 7 knots, 3 taps, no compliments, were a maze, but they wove you into this place, from dawn's waterhall to tonight's moonlit walk. You pat your needle. Maybe tomorrow's the day you'll mend that cloak. For now, the village sleeps, its heartbeat steady, and you're part of it, fines and all. Wind down. Now, let's ease you out of Hvitfisker, the fjord's whispers fading like a dream. Picture the village settling, its turf houses nestled under a quilt of stars, the sea's rhythm slowing to a gentle pulse. You're on your sheepskin bed, the peat fire's embers glowing soft, their warmth wrapping you like a woven cloak. The laws, those fussy rules about boats, sheep and sagas, drift away like cod slipping through a net. You're safe. The wind outside a distant hum, blending with that sea shanty lullaby, its notes long and low, carrying you deeper. The moon's light spills through the smoke hole, silver and calm, and your breath slows, matching the wave's lazy lap. Hvitfisker's heartbeat fades. Its elders, finds and fish, all part of a story you'll carry into sleep. Let your eyes close, your thoughts soften, and drift where the fjord leads. Good night.